All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. Today's lecture brought to you by the United States Botanic Garden. My name is Libby Rhodes. I'm the Public Programs Supervisor at the Garden. Now a little bit about our presenter. So Melanie Choukas-Bradley is a Washington, D.C. author and naturalist who leads field trips and trees tours for the Audubon Naturalist Society, the U.S. Botanic Garden, Smithsonian Associates, the Maryland Native Plant Society, the Rock Creek Conservancy, the Nature Conservancy, Casey Trees, Politics and Prose, and other organizations. Melanie's newest book is Resilience, Connecting with Nature in a Time of Crisis. She's also the author of The Joy of Forest Bathing, Reconnect with Wild Places and Rejuvenate Your Life, A Year in Rock Creek Park, The Wild Wooded Heart of Washington, D.C., City of Trees, The Complete Field Guide to the Trees of Washington, D.C., an illustrated guide to the eastern woodland wildflowers and trees, 350 plants observed at Sugarloaf Mountain, Maryland, and Sugarloaf, the mountain's history, geology, and natural lore. A longtime contributor to the Washington Post and other publications, Melanie has appeared as an author and guest expert on NPR's All Things Considered, Morning Edition, The Diane Rehm Show, and WAMU's The Kojo Nandi Show. In 2014, Melanie was awarded one of 4 inaugural Canopy Awards by Casey Trees for her efforts to educate people about the trees of Washington, D.C. Melanie is a certified nature and forest therapy guide. We're excited to have her here today talking about her latest book, Resilience, Connecting with Nature in a Time of Crisis. Please help me welcome Melanie Choukas-Bradley.
Thank you so much, Libby. Thank you all. I am so happy to be here, and I'm so glad I got a chance to see all of your beautiful faces, the faces of people who love nature as much as I do. So this is the new book, Resilience, Connecting with Nature in a Time of Crisis. Usually when I write a book, it takes me many years to write that book. For this book, I had a total of 10 days to finish it. My publisher wanted to do a whole series of books about resilience to help people cope with the pandemic. And he asked me to write a book about connecting with nature. So the books went from contract signing to publication in a total of 40 days, when it usually takes 18 months. It was really a wonderful thing to do. At first, I didn't think I'd be able to do it, but I consulted with nature-loving friends and colleagues all over the country, and they really kind of wrote the book for me. Hearing their experiences and their very eloquent ways of expressing how the pandemic was affecting them and how it was changing their relationship with nature was very inspiring to me. So I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, other than those credentials that Libby just talked about. I grew up in Vermont, and Vermont is a beautiful rural place, and I grew up wandering the woods and fields from a really young age and discovering that I just felt so much joy when I was in the woods. My husband and I got married and lived in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and when we moved to Washington, when he started law school many years ago, I was looking for a job as a journalist. But what happened to me instead was that I fell in love with the trees of Washington. We were living on Capitol Hill. This was my backyard, and I just fell in love with these trees. And when I discovered there was no book about them, and I learned that there was so much history behind them, going back to Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, who were serious tree lovers, I thought, well, I ought to write a book about them. So my life took a whole different turn. And since then, I have really focused on nature writing and leading nature trips. So the book on the left is City of Trees. That was my first book. This is the 3rd edition of that book. And I'm showing you these books because there's a common theme to all of them, which is they're all about my backyard, exploring my backyard, which is something I learned to do as a child. So City of Trees is about Washington, my backyard. After a few years, after my husband graduated from law school, we moved out to Sugarloaf Mountain. We were living in Montgomery County's agricultural reserve, right near Sugarloaf. So those two books in the middle are about Sugarloaf Mountain. And then we moved back to town, and Rock Creek Park became my backyard refuge. So I wrote a book about that. And then the book on the far right, I don't know if you can see it. My view of it is blocked by the windows, but it's called Finding Solace at Theodore Roosevelt Island, and it is coming out this summer. All of these books are illustrated by amazing women who are artists and photographers, and I had terrific collaborations on all of these projects. And then it's been my great joy for the past few years to be leading tree tours for the U.S. Botanic Garden on the Capitol grounds. The Capitol grounds now are officially an arboretum. And I lead tree tours there several times a year. And I also lead tours of the regional garden and forest bathing walks in the regional garden that we call botanical bliss walks. So those were my backyard books. And then a few years ago, I was leading a field trip in Rock Creek Park, and one of the participants brought an article. It was actually in Oprah's magazine, and it was about something called forest bathing. And she handed the article to me, and I just like soaked it up on the spot. And when I read this phrase, forest bathing, it really resonated with me. And I got what it meant right away, which is full immersion in the beauty and wonder of nature. And when I lead walks and I'm teaching people about trees and wildflowers and ecology, I love that. You know, I love the teaching, and I always learn so much from other people in the field too, who come on these trips, who have so much knowledge of their own. But my favorite moments are those quiet moments when something is so stunningly beautiful that we all just stop and feel the reverence of the moment. So when I read about forest bathing, I thought, this is what I've been doing all my life. This is definitely for me. And I became a certified forest therapy guide. And I also went to Japan for 3 weeks on a forest bathing trip. And this book traveled pretty far beyond to my backyard. That's the Finnish edition of the book on the left and the Spanish edition on the right. It's illustrated by an artist I've never met because she's Dutch and lives in the Netherlands. Her name's Lieke van der Vorst. She's very, very talented. I love her whimsical art that helps people connect with nature. So I want to talk about the time we're in now. And, you know, this is just such a complicated, difficult time for all of us. I hope good things are going to come out of it. I believe that they will. But, you know, during this time, I have found the resilience of nature to be my greatest comfort. And in talking to my friends and colleagues and family members, I discovered that a lot of people feel this way, that, you know, when the pandemic hit and we started to get the stay-at-home orders, it coincided with the beginning of spring in Washington and throughout North America. And we are so blessed in this area. I just think of it as a natural embarrassment of riches, because we have our cherry trees, we have our magnolias, we have all of these beautiful cultivated trees and other plants in you know, gardens and beautiful cultivated grounds. And then we have so many wild places too. So these two beautiful photographs by my friend Anna Kaha-Anui, who is one of the co-founders of Capital Nature, I'm going to talk a little bit about that more later. They kind of represent, you know, both parts of Washington, the cultivated part, you know, represented by the tidal basin cherry trees. And then probably a lot of you recognize these Virginia bluebells on the right. It's one of our loveliest wildflowers, and it grows all along the Potomac and Anacostia rivers and along Rock Creek. And it's just such a lovely little flower with the bluebells and the little pink buds. So, you know, being out in nature during this time and just feeling life carrying on and everything awakening was just such a comfort, and just really helped me to stay sane. And I'm sure a lot of you felt that way too. And I want to hear from you at the close. I'm going to invite you. Let me just put this question out here now. And you can respond anytime, and then we'll you know, kind of address it at the end. How has your connection with nature changed or deepened during the pandemic? And I'd also like to know where you live. because I know a lot of us are in the Washington area, but other people live farther afield. So one of the things I recommend in this new book is to adopt a wild home. This is something I recommend to people at any time, but it's especially important now. What is a wild home? A wild home is just any natural area that's close to where you live. So it can be your backyard, it can be a park or a garden down the street, it can just be a tree that you're especially drawn to, someplace that's close by that you can visit again and again. Because my view about how we connect with nature is it's very much like the way we connect with people. When you meet someone for the first time, you learn their name. You know, you may notice, oh, he has a really good sense of humor, or, you know, what an intelligent person. You pick up, you know, certain things right off the bat. But it's in getting to know someone over time that your relationship deepens and your appreciation of the person when you learn all their dimensions and moods. It's the same thing with nature. If you have a place that you really get to know, you develop such a strong love of that place, and you're constantly comforted by the familiar, but also always surprised by new things that happen there. Very much like with a person. So I really encourage this, and it's been so important now. I mean, we can't travel, we can't go to all these wonderful national parks in our country. We've had to stay home, and it's been an opportunity to really connect with our immediate surroundings. This is my backyard. One of the first things I did when the stay-at-home order came out in Maryland was I ordered a hammock. I had worn out my old hammock, and I have this hammock, and I thought, I really want to have a hammock if I'm going to be staying home. And my husband, who has been working at home, and I have found that we're just noticing so much more of what's going on around us right here at home. I mean, normally we're so busy, we're running around hither and yon, and those roses that you can see back there just dazzled us. I mean, we watched them from the very first bud coming out, and just were so enchanted by them and by everything happening in the yard with the birds and the butterflies. So that's my wild home. Now, I asked my friends to share about their wild homes, and my friend Sadie Dingfelder, who you may know, she's a Washington Post, longtime Washington Post writer. She used to have a column for Washington Post Express. So she lives in DC, not too far from Nationals Park. And this is what she wrote to me about her wild home. I have a newfound appreciation for my tiny porch. I live on the 10th floor of an apartment building in DC's most densely populated neighborhood. And I've discovered a patch of urban wilderness I never knew existed right outside of my sliding glass doors. I write every morning looking through them, and I've made the acquaintance of a pair of dark-colored pigeons, both of whom have a few wing feathers that are pure white. When I'm on the occasional grocery run, I sometimes see that they too are out and about in the neighborhood. I just love that. I mean, who pays attention to pigeons? But this is, you know, Sadie, who's usually traveling around the world and traveling around the city and having all kinds of adventures. She made friends with these pigeons and noticed them when they were out. And she was out shopping, and they were out and about too. So that just really touched me. And I heard so many stories like that of just people like, you know, noticing robins for the first time, listening to robins, watching robins, the common things around us that we kind of take for granted. This was an opportunity to really appreciate them. And then I talk in the book about nature immersion as a mindfulness practice. And I'm sure a lot of you have mindfulness practices, meditation, yoga, or Tai Chi. And forest bathing is also a mindfulness practice. So you can take any of your mindfulness practices that you usually do indoors, outdoors. And forest bathing, I do want to like kind of give you an introduction to it. So it's translated from Shindin-yoku, the Japanese Shindin-yoku. And I use nature immersion, forest bathing, and forest therapy all kind of interchangeably. You could probably find fine differences among those phrases, but really it's all about, that deep kind of nature connection. I did go to Japan on a forest bathing trip 2.5 years ago, which was amazing. And one of the things I really loved was, you see this sign on the left. You see these signs on the highway that are directing you to the healing forests. They now have over 60 forests in Japan dedicated to forest bathing and to the health benefits of being in the forest. Forest bathing itself didn't really start until the 1980s, which is when the phrase Shindin-yoku was first coined by the Forestry Agency in Japan. But it's really rooted in the ancient Japanese reverence for nature. On the right, you can see there's a little tiny Shinto shrine with a red roof, and then behind it is a pine tree with a rope and tassels around it. That's a sacred tree. The Japanese people, they feel that the divine and nature are all connected. So this practice of forest bathing is rooted in that culture, but it has become popular all over the world, all over Asia, Europe, all the continents. I don't know if there have been forest bathing walks on Antarctica yet, but I would not be surprised. It's also an evidence-based practice. And there's been a lot of health research. There are two Japanese researchers, Dr. Lee, and Dr. Lee is at Nippon Medical School, and Dr. Mazaki at Chiba University. They really got the ball rolling with this research about the health benefits of spending time in nature, but it's now been studied all over the world. And these physical health benefits, I don't know if you can read the type here. Libby, can you read the type on this slide?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so these are some of the physical health benefits that have been shown from spending time in nature. Lower blood pressure, lower pulse rate, increased heart rate variability, which is a good thing. Lower cortisol levels. Cortisol is a hormone that in high levels can indicate stress. And then this is really exciting, a boost to the immune system and an increase in natural killer or NK cells. The plants give off compounds called phytoncides, which protect them from pathogens. And Dr. Lee has shown in his research that when we inhale them, they give our own immune systems a boost. And then quicker recovery from illness and surgery. There was one study that showed that if people could just see trees outside their hospital windows, they recovered more quickly. When we were in Japan, we participated in the health research. On the left, we are there getting our vital signs checked at a forest therapy base in Okatama, which is about 2.5 hours from Tokyo. The good guy in the black hat in the middle is Amos Clifford. He started the organization, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy in California. And the woman in the foreground is his wife, Michelle Lott. She's a graphic designer. And then there are two forest bathing guides in the back, Michael Stusser and Jamie Trost. Jamie was our, he was our translator. He had taught English in Japan for 2 years. And we were in a lot of places where we were the only Westerners. So we really needed that. And before and after every walk that we went on in Japan, we had our vital signs checked. And then if you can see me on the right, I've got like a little booklet around my neck that recorded all the health data from all of our walks in Japan. And my blood pressure went down after every walk. It also went down the longer I was in Japan. And then we went to Dr. Miyazaki's lab at Chiba University outside of Tokyo. This is one of his research assistants. And I'm having my, the brain waves in the frontal part of my brain measured. They showed me on a screen, they showed me like a really intense urban scene with no green in it at all. And they, measure my brain waves. And then they showed a forest scene. And according to Dr. Miyazaki, my everything just calmed right down when I was looking at the forest. So the mental health benefits, I think now during this time, this is just so important for all of us to take advantage of the mental health benefits of time spent in nature. And they include These are things that have been shown in the research. Those of us who spend a lot of time in nature don't need this research. We know these things are true, but it's nice to have the data. It's very nice because then medical professionals take nature time seriously, and people who might not necessarily prioritize it in their own lives, when they find that it's, you know, proven to be good for them, are more apt to spend time in nature. So I'm very grateful for all this research. And, you know, even though I have this kind of feeling of duh, you know, duh, elevated mood, improved focus. And then this is a really big one, you know, for me in my own life, I know how true this is, a decrease in ruminative thoughts. Ruminative thinking is unproductive, negative thinking, where you just kind of keep turning something over. You're not getting anywhere. You're not solving a problem. You're just kind of chewing on it. And being out in nature just really, really helps with that. And they did a study at Stanford University that demonstrated this very clearly. Relaxation, better sleep, and a boost in imagination and creativity. And especially with children, you know, when children are outside in nature, their imaginations just go wild and they do all kinds of creative things. And they weave yoga into a lot of the forest bathing walks in Japan. I'm so glad that the U.S. Botanic Garden has kept up their yoga in the garden Saturday mornings. I don't know if any of you participated in yoga in the garden right before this talk, but you know, usually like when I would lead tours of the Capitol grounds, I'd see everybody coming in on Saturday morning with their yoga mats. And now they're doing it at home. And probably a lot of them are doing it outdoors. Yoga goes very well with the out of doors. And in Japan, they have all this infrastructure for forest bathing. And they have these platforms in Hinoki cypress forests where you go on a walk and then there's a yoga instructor just waiting for you to lead you into practice. It's really, really wonderful. They also have in Japan signs on the trails that talk about the health benefits of being in nature. And this one is about sound and something they call pink noise. And pink noise those are the natural sounds that are so soothing for us, like flowing water, the breeze through the trees, the songs of birds, all those natural sounds are very, very healing. So I just kind of want to walk you through a forest bathing walk. So you can do this on your own, like in your wild home, right in your backyard, wherever you are. The first thing you want to do is to unplug. I tell people on my walks, think of the airplane mode setting on your phone as forest bathing mode. Or better yet, leave your phone at home. You know, we're just bombarded by so much, and just the very act of turning off our devices is therapeutic in and of itself. And then you want to breathe deeply and engage your senses. When you breathe, you know, when you're around trees, you are breathing in the oxygen that they emit, and then they are taking in the carbon dioxide that you breathe out, and they need it for photosynthesis. So your breath in the forest or, you know, around any plants just connects you with their life in a very, very real way. And you're not only breathing in this fresh oxygen, but the phytoncides that I mentioned as well. And then when we're leading as guides, when we're leading walks, we will, you know, we'll give these, we call them invitations. We'll give an invitation to focus on sight. Notice what's in motion. Just try this. Try this later today when you're outside. Ask yourself to notice what's in motion and just spend, 5 or 10 minutes noticing what's in motion. It sounds so simple, but it is a powerful mindfulness exercise. I promise you. I don't want to say any more than that because you'll discover on your own how powerful it can be. And then smells are so, they're just so evocative, especially of memory. Like you can smell something that will bring you right back to childhood. This was a walk we went on in Okutama. The guide was she had a tech job in Tokyo during the week, and then on the weekends she would come out to Okatama to lead forest bathing walks. This whole walk was focused on fragrances, the fragrances of the plants and everything around us. It was wonderful. And then sounds, you know, when you cup your ears like that, it's amazing how much it magnifies the sound. I learned another trick up in the Japanese Alps from another guide. I'm going to try to demonstrate it. So what you do is when you're near flowing water, any kind of flowing water, it can be a stream, it can even be like a fountain in the city. You turn your back to the water and you close your eyes and then cup your ears in the front. And you will be amazed at how, you know, the sound of that water just fills your soul. Simple things like that are so great. And touch, you know, a lot of us are really touch deprived now, and especially people who have been sheltering alone. But even those of us who, you know, we have our little bubbles where we can hug people, but we love a lot of people that we can't hug or touch now, and we can touch the plants. I mean, you want to know what poison ivy is, and you probably don't want to snuggle up to a nettle plant, but you can touch, you know, touching plants, touching trees, touching bark and stones. It's just so therapeutic, touching the moss. And then communing with a tree. And these are all things we do on forest bathing walks. You know, to my mind, one of the most powerful nature experiences you can have is to commune with a tree, to really get to know a particular tree. When we were in the Akasawa healing forest up in the beginning of the Japanese Alps, our guide carried these silver mats in just like a fabric grocery bag and then gave them to us so that we could lie under this 300-year-old Hinoki cypress tree. This was my favorite experience of the whole time I was in Japan. It had rained in the morning, and this tree was well over 100 feet tall. It had stopped raining, but when the breeze blew, raindrops would fall from the crown of the tree and land on our faces. And I was lying there with my eyes open, watching raindrops fall from the top of the crown of this tree all the way down and landing on my face. It was just magical. And, you know, trees can just bring us so much joy. You know, our connection with trees. This guide, his name is Kariki-san. He was probably the most joyful person I have ever met. People come from all over Asia and Europe to study with him, and that's Akira, who's one of his apprentices. He did such fun things with us. One of the things we did was he had us like stomp through this really painfully icy stream, and you know, our ankles were killing us. And then we got to stomp in the mud. There's this huge mud puddle, and he went over, you know, of course he was barefoot too, and he was stomping in the mud. It was wonderful. This was up in the Japanese Alps, north of Nagano. And this lady, some of you may know her. Her name is Claire Kelly. She is a forest therapy guide and a yoga instructor. Until just a couple of months ago, she was leading forest bathing walks at the National Arboretum for friends of the National Arboretum, including in the moonlight. Her moonlight forest bathing walks were really, really popular. She has moved to Arizona. We hope she'll be back, but she's living in Arizona now, and you can just see her joy hanging from that tree. It's a dawn redwood out at Brookside Gardens. And, you know, like I said, one of the first things I did was to get a hammock. This was another wonderful experience we had in Japan, walking some horses up through this forest and then hanging out in the hammocks. Anytime you can sit by water, wade in water, swim in water is great for your mental health. And then on a forest bathing walk, you want to have a transition back to daily life. I find that sometimes people are just so relaxed and so, you know, kind of blissful that they don't necessarily want to return to daily life. So we have we have ways of helping people transition back. We have a tea ceremony. This was in Japan, up in the Alps. they made it all so beautiful. Most of us don't do anything quite that elaborate here, but I usually serve pure maple sap from sugar maple trees in Vermont that's bottled, and maple candies and walnuts, because they're all gifts from the trees. And some guides make tea from plants, you know, that you can make tea from a lot of different plants. I've made tea from spicebush, which grows along Rock Creek. And then we'll read poetry and just kind of talk about what we're going to take back to our daily life with us. I think it's really important. You know, I mentioned like finding a wild home and getting to know it in all kinds of weather and times of year and times of day, to go out at night as well as during the day. And lately, the sky has been so clear. Just, you know, this is probably the clearest, cleanest air any of us have seen in a long, long time. And I notice, like, I live in Chevy Chase, and I'm seeing stars that I haven't seen here before. And it's a really good time to tune into the phases of the moon. Last night was the full strawberry moon. We couldn't really see it because of the rain, but maybe we'll get a chance to see it tonight, and just to tune in to the nighttime as well as the day. And also to go out in the rain. This wonderful quote from Thoreau, the full quote is, "It is worth the while to walk in wet weather. The earth and leaves are strewn with pearls." And I experienced that yesterday. I went into Rock Creek Park, and it had poured the night before. The sun was shining and sparkling on every raindrop, on every leaf. And I thought of Thoreau, and especially on the jewel weed. You know, it's called jewel weed. It's a low-growing plant with a little orange or yellow flower. It's called jewel weed because of the way the rain beads on the leaves. And it just can be magical to be out in all kinds of weather. Now, I'm just doing a quick time check here, Libby. I think we're good. So I've been talking kind of more about mindfulness and nature, but this is also a really good time to become a backyard naturalist. This is Stephanie Mason. She is the senior naturalist for the Audubon Naturalist Society. And I interviewed her for the book. She has a lot of wisdom to share about, you know, how you can become a naturalist during this time. And I love this quote. "You don't have to practice social distancing with a violet. You can bend down and peer into its flowering face and breathe deeply of its scent." And she talks about, I mean, she's a naturalist who knows everything about plants, animals, birds. You know, she's probably the most well-known, well-rounded naturalist that I know. But she appreciates the fact that the most important thing is to just get out there and connect with nature. And these are some of the joys of being a backyard naturalist. I saw, yesterday I saw a tiger swallowtail, that yellow and black butterfly. I saw several of them flying through the rain-washed canopy. I didn't see any dragonflies yesterday, but I saw damselflies. Now this is my dear friend, Ana Ka'ahanui. She's Hawaiian. And she and her partner, Stella Tarnay, have co-founded, as I mentioned, they've co-founded this wonderful organization called Capital Nature. And what she is doing there, she's got her iNaturalist shirt on. She is using the iNaturalist app. And it's an app that can help you identify almost anything that you find in nature, whether it's a plant or a critter. And it helps you identify it. And then you send the data in, and it becomes part of a global database for living things around the world. And Anna has, just really discovered, both Anna and Stella, and I quote them in my new book, have really appreciated just being in the backyard or on the porch, just tuning into whatever is immediately around you. And then children in nature, they just have such curiosity and joy. This little girl is holding out, some little worm in her hand. The little boy in the middle is looking at a box turtle. The little girl on the right has just built a fairy house. I have a whole chapter on children in nature. And Stephanie Botso, who is the preschool director for the Audubon Naturalist Society preschool, she talks about how when kids are out in nature, they get all their needs met. You know, if they want to run around, they can run around. If they want to sit quietly under a tree, they can do that. You know, being out in nature is so good for them. And I know a lot of families, you know, homeschooling is not easy. And I think it's such a relief for parents as well as children to just get outside. And you know, I remember when my children were toddlers, one of my favorite things was to just follow them around the yard. You know, if they wanted to spend 20 minutes with one puddle, that was great. And, you know, for us as adults to see the world through their eyes is also just incredibly therapeutic for us. And then I have a chapter in the book called Hands in the Dirt. And one of the things I noticed in myself and a lot of people I know is that there was just such a desire to grow our own food. You know, it was partly this insecurity of, you know, are we going to have food? Is it going to be safe? You know, going to the grocery store became a bit stressful, but I think it's a deeper desire to connect with the earth, you know, and this person on the left is digging into the compost, you know, and a lot of people have been talking about how therapeutic composting is. And these are all pictures. All these black and white pictures are by Susan Austin Roth, who did the photography for the Rock Creek Park book. And she's got a garden out. She lives near Charlottesville, and she has a garden out there. And where the wild foods are, I also suddenly started doing a lot of just kind of impromptu foraging. I ate a lot of violets and a lot of violet leaves this spring, and I discovered that they're rich in vitamins A and C. And then on the right, those are redbud flowers. I ate a lot of those as well. They're loaded with vitamin C. Now, of course, you don't want to nibble wild foods unless you really know the plants, because as you all know, many of them are poisonous. But if you really know your plants, I use just the Peterson Field Guide to Edible Plants. You know, I look plants up in there, and it's amazing how many of them are edible, or you can make tea from them. And also I like Yule Gibbons' book, Stalking the Wild Asparagus. The little girl in the middle is having a berry feast, and we're now coming into berry season. I've got my eye on a whole lot of blueberries they're green now, but they're going to turn blue soon, and ripening blackberries and black raspberries and all kinds of berries to look forward to this summer. One of the most exciting developments now is that doctors are prescribing nature to their patients, and are really taking seriously the health benefits of spending time in nature. This is Dr. Robert Czar. He's the founder of Park RX America. He is a pediatrician, and many doctors have joined his organization, and they're prescribing nature to their patients. He's such a great guy, and he doesn't force anything on the kids, but he'll find out what they like to do outside. So like if Johnny likes to play soccer on a Wednesday, he'll say, well, maybe you could, you know, in the neighborhood park, maybe you could play on a Monday and a Friday as well. He just does anything he can to gently encourage them to spend more time in nature. And I just think this is one of the best developments, you know, in the health profession. And, you know, nature is free. It's free, and it's there for us. And then there's this growing partnership between the public health community and park administrators. I've been at a number of conferences and meetings of, you know, park administrators, doctors, forest therapy guides, everybody just getting together to brainstorm ways to encourage people to spend more time in nature. And it's a win-win, because people become healthier, and then they become more sensitive stewards of the land. So these are some of the places in Washington that I have led forest bathing walks. Rock Creek Park. I lead walks for Smithsonian Associates in their garden behind the castle, and it's the Enid Hopped Garden, and then there's this wonderful garden inside the Enid Hopped Garden called the Moongate Garden, and we're there having tea at the end of our walk. Those walks are going virtual this summer, and I hope to resume them again in the fall. On the right is another one of Anna's beautiful photos, and this last year I led several walks among the bonsai trees at the National Arboretum, And we're doing that water cupping thing now. We're standing with our backs to a fountain with our eyes closed and our ears cupped in the front. And then the U.S. Botanic Garden, this is the National Garden. This is a graphic of the whole National Garden. And within the National Garden is the Regional Garden. You can see it there in the center, and it goes over to the left to the amphitheater. That's all native plants and native plant habitat. And it's just a wonderful resource. And that's where we do our botanical bliss walks. And Sugarloaf Mountain, you know, I lived in the shadow of Sugarloaf Mountain for 20 years, and you know, it was my wild home all that time, and I just love it. And I did get out there this week, and I have to tell you, if you get a chance to go out there, it might be crowded this weekend, but if you can go like early next week, the mountain laurel is in full bloom, and the entire mountain is one big bouquet. It is really, really something. I had to cancel every June I go out to Aspen, and I lead forest bathing walks for the Aspen Center for Environmental Studies. This is the Aspen forest where we walk barefoot and wade in a very, very icy stream. It's wonderful, but that didn't happen this year. And this may or may not happen. The last 2 Septembers, I've led trips for Smithsonian Associates to Theodore Roosevelt National Park in western North Dakota in the Badlands. Theodore Roosevelt, as a young man, went out there. He went out there initially hunting, and then he became a cattle rancher as a young man in his early and mid-20s. And there's a lot of history out there. There are wild bison, just incredibly beautiful country. And we do forest bathing on those trips. Although they're very focused on natural history and history, we take our moments to do some forest bathing. And then Rock Creek Park is just it's my refuge. You know, my backyard has become more important to me, but this is my big backyard. And Rock Creek Park is the oldest urban national park in the country, and it's one of the largest, twice the size of Central Park. And most of the trees have been left alone since 1890. So the canopy is just extraordinary. And on a really hot summer day, to walk into that canopy, I know I'm showing you a winter picture as I'm saying this, but it's just, it's almost like walking into an air-conditioned room. I love all the seasons in Rock Creek Park. This is Boundary Bridge, a little footbridge, part of the Roosevelt New Deal project. It's got 1935 carved into the side of it, and it takes you from Maryland into Washington, D.C. And these are all Susan Austin Roth's beautiful photographs of the wildflowers, springtime in Washington, summer, that deep canopy I mentioned, autumn. I just love all the seasons. And, you know, one of the things that I really feel that this, everything we're going through now, as difficult as it is, it's an opportunity for transformation, and it's an opportunity for insight. And, you know, I know the last couple of weeks, things have become very, you know, there's just a lot going on, and I'm sure everybody has a lot of feelings about it. And I don't want to try to characterize it, but I am hopeful that good is going to come from this. And from the pandemic itself, I interviewed some of my friends, and they just had such wonderful things to say about how their personal worlds were transforming. This is my friend Betsy Bass, who lives on the side of Sugarloaf Mountain in Maine, you know, the big Sugarloaf. She wrote, and she's an environmentalist and photographer. She wrote, "The world is one large web. Actions in one part of the world impact eventually all parts of the world. We have seen this with the coronavirus, but polluting our waters, cutting forests, building too densely, and removing wetlands all negatively impact our wildlife, migrating birds, the air we breathe, and contribute to climate change. I now have time to observe and reflect on these issues and consider how I can continue to help keep our world, people, nature, wildlife, and climate healthy." And then Tim Ward, who is an author, and he's actually the publisher of my resilience book and 9 other books about resilience during the pandemic. He wrote, he and his wife Teresa have been on the Eastern Shore for most of this time, and he wrote, "I walk along a mostly deserted beach 2 or 3 times each day. Normally it gets busy in spring, not this year. When I get stressed and anxious, I look at the seabirds and dolphins. They are unconcerned. I realize the earth carries on, barely noticing our self-inflicted wound. I find this reminder of humanity's insignificance strangely comforting." And I think a lot of people have felt that way, that like feeling like you're part of the whole web of life can be very comforting. And, you know, one of the things that has really gotten me through this time is these 2 ladies, these 2 wonderful women who are friends of mine, Sandy Willen on the left, under her mask and under her beautiful flowering tree, and Terry Markle on the right. They have been walking almost every day. They walk many miles a day, and they have been walking for the last few months, you know, since March, past the Botanic Gardens, you know, seeing all the tulips blooming, up to the Capitol grounds. They have been sending me pictures of all of the flowers and trees that I've been missing because I've been staying closer to home here. And it's just really gotten me through. And in the middle, Sandy sent me this picture. This is Duck Watch from City Wildlife. They're herding a group of Canada geese down to Constitution Gardens, right down the street next to the old executive office building, which is now called the Eisenhower Building, I think, next to the White House. And then Sandy kept sending me pictures of this family to let me know they were okay. And it was just such a comfort to me. And she wrote, and I quoted her in the book, "What is different is the amount of time," you know, when I asked, how are you relating to nature differently now? "What is different is the amount of time I have to observe up close and personally the blooming flowers, the greening of the trees, the daily subtle changes, the sounds and the fragrances of spring, and most delightful, the songs of the birds. Is it my imagination, or are the birds singing louder than ever this year? I know I am taking the time to listen, and for once, nature and these birds have my undivided attention." And Terry has a wonderful blog called Female Solo Trek, and she usually reports from her travels around the world. What she's been reporting on lately is her travels around the city. So these are blooming now. I smelled my first one yesterday. I hope you can get out and find a magnolia and stick your nose in it. Best medicine ever. And if we have time, let's see. I think we have time. What I would like to do now is just kind of a little forest bathing exercise. So this is my Himalayan singing bowl, those of you who can see me. And I take this on forest bathing walks and I kind of ring it in between the invitations I give to people. What I invite you to do now is to close your eyes and imagine that you're in a natural place that you love. It can be a place that you visit every day. It can be a place you remember from your childhood. Some beautiful place where you have felt happy and relaxed in the past. I'm going to ring my bell and then invite you to just go there. hope you had a lovely time in your place. And I'd like to share a poem that some of you may know. It's by Wendell Berry. It's called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair grows in me and I wake in the middle of the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. So these are some other forest bathing books that I can recommend if you're interested in learning more. Amos Clifford's book is the book at the top, right in the middle, Your Guide to Forest Bathing. And then on the lower left and lower right are Dr. Mazaki and Dr. Lee's books. And then in the upper right-hand corner is a book by my friend Suzanne Bartlett Hackenmiller. She's a doctor and an athlete, and it's about, if you're very athletic, how you can weave forest bathing into, things you like to do outdoors, mountain climbing, kayaking, and so forth. I also have a friend who wrote a book about forest bathing with your dog, Nadine Mazzola, and I actually wrote the foreword to that book. And she leads walks with her dog, Juliet. They lead walks for people and their dogs. So, and I'd like to just thank the U.S. Botanic Garden. Thank Libby so much. I love working with Libby. I'm glad we can continue to work together during this time. And all these wonderful photographers that contributed pictures for this presentation. So, do any of you have thoughts about how your relationship with nature has changed during this time, or do you have questions?
Melanie, I have a couple responses that some people posted. If you'd like to hear some of them.
Yes, so, absolutely.
Someone wrote in there in PG County, and they said, by losing my job for the duration of the pandemic, my weekends have been freed up and give me the time to visit my parks close to home. I've been spending a lot of time down at the Patuxent River.
Great. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. So there's a silver lining there for this person, and I'm so glad that you've been able to use the time to go and visit those parks.
Yeah, another person wrote, I live in Northern Virginia in a very small apartment. I try to spend at least an hour a day walking in my neighborhood. I pay a lot more attention to nature now because I spend so much time in a built environment. I really appreciate my local cemetery, which is park-like and open and allows people to walk and spread out so we can socially distance.
How wonderful.
Yeah.
That is just wonderful.
There are several cemeteries across the U.S., I believe, that are also certified arboretums. Is that correct?
Yes. And most of them, and the cemeteries in our area have beautiful trees, absolutely beautiful trees, and they're very peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Someone wrote to us from Olympia, Washington, and said that they walk the Capitol campus every day in Olympia. The state publishes a pamphlet identifying all the trees, our favorites, a giant English oak and the Douglas fir moon tree from a seed that went to the moon.
Oh, how wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
That is just great.
Yeah, someone lives in Northwest and with their husband. Every morning we walk for 2 hours in the woods or urban paths. I take photos and post about 10 on Facebook. People from all over the world have been taking these walks with us. June 13th will be my 100th day in a row of posting these photos of nature. Wow,
that is fabulous. Is there a way that we can see those posts, or is this just for her friends?
I don't know. If the person...
That is such a creative idea, isn't it? That's fabulous.
Mm-hmm. Someone had a question here. Have you noticed the land change at all this year and spring due to climate change, or for the better because less people are driving or using fossil fuels this spring? I don't know if you can answer that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has been some evidence, studies that the air is cleaner because of fewer fossil fuels. And just anecdotally, I mean, on a day when the sky is blue, I cannot believe how blue it is. And as I mentioned before, I'm seeing stars here in my neighborhood that, I usually don't see. So I think there's no question that the air is cleaner. I don't know, if it's going to have a long-term effect on climate change. If we just go back to our old ways, and I think also there's a danger of, relaxing standards to, to get through this time. So I think we have to really stay aware of what's going on. I have enjoyed the quiet and the clearness of the air. That's been a silver lining for me.
Thank you. We're almost to the end of our hour. If someone said they saw a NASA study yesterday showing preliminary findings that carbon dioxide decrease in the atmosphere over places that have stay-at-home orders. That's interesting if you want to look up that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good news.
Yeah, right? So we're coming. It's just about 12:30. So if anyone else has a question they would like to ask in the chat, we probably have time for one more. People are still sharing how they're connecting with nature, walking in Meridian Hill Park. Someone connected to us, they're in Texas now, that they get to wander on the land and observe there. They used to live in Capitol Hill though, so they appreciated like Congressional Cemetery and other areas, Smithsonian Gardens and the Arboretum as respites. So thank you, Melanie. This has been a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for sharing. And
one question for sure. Where do they get the book?
Oh, so you can get the book from Politics and Prose, from the Audubon Naturalist Society, from their bookshop, and also from Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Great.
And they may say that the book, what happened was the first print run sold out. I think the second print run sold out as well, but there's another whole shipment of books coming. And so you might have to wait a few days for the book, but it's good to order it now because if they sell out again, then it'll be a long wait. So I think from all those places, you can order it now.
Great. Thank you, Melanie, and thanks to everybody who is attending today. You'll get a quick survey in your email if you ever have time and are able to fill that out. We really appreciate your feedback on this and all of our programs. But again, thank you so much to Melanie for spending time with us today and sharing these wonderful insights about connecting with nature during crisis. So thank you so much. And
thank you so much, Libby. It's such a joy for me. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, everybody.